Hello, and welcome to another episode of
The Super Data Brothers Super Show.
That's right, I'm Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are two real-life brothers who work in the data and analytics industry. And we got a good one for you today, folks.
You know, Ryan, I'm so excited for today's show because, we've been talking a lot about data teams need to justify their existence, right? And one way to do that is to make money for the organization, right? The other way to justify your existence and keep around is to stop being so expensive for your organization. A big part of that is cloud costs, right? Everything is in the cloud now. And they tricked us. They got us in there. And now the rates are getting jacked up and everyone's paying out the wazoo. So there's got to be stuff you can do to keep those costs down while still staying in the cloud, because realistically, most organizations aren't going back to local if they've started as a startup all in the cloud. They're not building their own on-prem infrastructure.
They're not going to set up a new server rack in the closet of the headquarters. Yeah, unlikely. No. And of course, we have, I think, third-time guest Lindsay Murphy will be joining us with a recorded interview that I did at Data Council this year. Lindsay did an amazing presentation with very practical steps on how to rein in your cloud data stack, data costs. Of course, as Eric said, there's two sides to the ROI equation. There's the R and the I, right? And if you're having a hard time justifying the R, maybe you can do something about the I. And a lot of that might be wasted spend on cloud services and cloud tools. So the other thing you can do to justify your ROI to your organization is shouting us out in the chat here on the Super Data Brothers show.
Transition.
Yeah, I know. You can tell we've been doing this for a while, right? This is a live show, folks. It is more fun for us. It is more fun for you if you get those reactions, questions, comments into the chat. Of course, we always give you a shout out when you let us know where you're watching from. So go ahead and do that now if you would like said shout out. Before we get into the interview with Lindsay, too, we do want to share Carl tuning in from home. And a probable Stanley Cup champion Panthers. So that's, of course, we're in Michigan. We're Red Wings fans. Quite a drought up here as far as hockey's concerned. But hey, we got the Lions.
Okay. Almost went to the Super Bowl.
That was painful. So stop burning cheddar on data is today's topic. Before we get into it, it is possible to meet us. We are two real live people.
In real life.
Believe it or not. So we've been to many events this year where you could have met us, but coming up, we have in a week, 2 weeks, I will be at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in London, May 13th through 15th. Come and say hi if you're attending the conference. There's lots of events going on outside of the conference as well, where we might be able to say hello. I will be doing another print run of the coveted Super Data Brothers t-shirt. So if you are attending Gartner London, you will have the opportunity to get a t-shirt there, but only if you track me down early because they go fast, folks. And then we have Andy tuning in from Fort Worth, Texas. Good to see you here again, Andy. All right. And that covers what we need to cover before we get into the interview with Lindsay. So let me pull this thing off of here.
All right, hold on. Yeah. Before we do that, I actually have a relevant Simpsons clip for the week. So I won't give it much intro. I'll just play it for you. And
let's see. I haven't seen this, so this is new to me too, folks. Let's see what we got. Let's see what we got.
All right.
There's nothing better than a cigarette, unless it's a cigarette lit with $100 bill. Put $5,000 on the Lakers. Hire Kenny G to play for me in the elevator. My house is dirty. Buy me a clean one.
Krusty, as your accountant, I must warn you.
Did you send those 1,000 roses to B. Arthur's grave?
Yes, but she's still...
I don't want to hear the end of any sentences.
George Carlin on 3.
Yeah? Lawsuit? Oh, come on. Well, excuse me. Give him 10 grand.
Steve Martin on 4.
10 grand.
You've got to stop blowing your money like this, Krusty.
No can do.
There you go.
I like that VC money at the end.
Yeah, well, just burn that over,
Hey,
put that text over the Action Comics. So
you gotta do it, right? I mean, look, they gave you $3.5 million. They expect you to spend it, folks.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, it was funny, when I made the transition from working like at established companies to working at startups, it is very true that your venture backers, like, they want to see you spending the money. If you're not spending the money, it makes them feel like you don't know what you're doing.
I gave you all this money. How come you're not doing stuff with it?
If you
To
had
make
a
me
vision,
money.
you would be burning all the money I gave you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that, let's invite pre-recorded Lindsay to the show here and see what she has to say. Practical steps on avoiding a Krusty the Clown situation with your data budget. Everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Super Data Brothers, this time coming at you live from Data Council in Austin, Texas. And I am thrilled to be joined by Lindsay.
Hello.
Welcome
Hello.
to the show.
Yeah.
Two-time guest Lindsay Murphy with Howkota.
Yes.
So you just finished your presentation here at Data Council, and I thought it was phenomenal, so I wanted to share it with our audience. What is it that you talked about here?
Yeah, so I dug into the topic of cost containment for data teams and how this is kind of like a forgotten part of ROI. Like, obviously, if you know an ROI formula, cost is part of it. But I think data teams are focusing a lot on the value side, which is important, but we're not really that focused on the cost side. So I was kind of digging into that concept.
You shared a comment that I loved, which was, I'm paraphrasing probably, but the modern data stack is designed to help you spend money.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I kind of was painting the picture of like the data stack, I think, has grown up during the zero interest rate period where there hasn't really been a lot of pressure on the system. And I think businesses and data teams and data companies have kind of been able to develop, like, I guess, maybe not bad behavior, but there wasn't really a lot of pressure to show bottom line, to show profitability. And so I think not only data teams, but also data companies have grown up in this space where, like, it was easy to get funding, it was easy to get more runway. We were more focused probably on revenue and user growth and all these things rather than what's the bottom line for our company. And so I think there's kind of been this switch now where modern data stack companies are now kind of forced to make revenue and make profit. And so they're changing their pricing models, or they're pricing things in ways that purposely make it easy to spend money and not super easy to figure out how to optimize that.
Yeah. What would you say that, like, what are the top drivers of data team spend that you see?
It depends, I think, definitely on what you're doing with your team and like how big your team is and your data size. But I think like probably for most teams, and I know in my experience, I've mostly worked at like B2B SaaS over the last couple jobs, is you're going to spend a lot on your ETL, so moving data into the warehouse, and then a lot probably on your compute in your warehouse. At my last company, we actually had Redshift and we had like reserved nodes. We had like a certain, like we would just spend the same amount every month.
Yeah.
And it would just degrade performance if we were running a lot. So I think even in that situation, like our team kind of probably got into some bad behavior where if we were ever forced to move to a different pricing model, we would be like in a pretty bad situation where we have like models that aren't performing very well and they're probably really costly and we don't even really know. So yeah, I think ETL, data warehouse, and probably your seat-based, like your BI tools, things like that are probably going to cost a lot as well.
Do you think, I sometimes worry that a lot of data teams, they don't know they have a problem until it's too late.
Yes.
Right? How do you think, first of all, do you think there are a lot of data teams in that situation? And then, what can you start to do to get a handle on this sort of thing?
Yeah. It was funny. There was actually a gentleman who just came up to me after the talk, and he was sort of saying like, this was a really relevant talk because we're actually going through this problem ourselves, and it wasn't until we really started digging into the data where we realized like, hey, there's a query that like the annualized cost of this is something like $30,000, and so they went and looked at it and they dug into it and they found the person who was running this query, and they went to this person and started saying like, hey, did you know like that this query that you're running is like takes 4 hours to run and it's costing this much money? And the guy was just like, oh yeah, I just thought it was a lot of data and that's why it took 4 hours to run. And so I think that was my biggest takeaway is like, sometimes people just don't really know until you start digging into this, like how much money you're actually spending. So like exposing that information, making it a little bit more in front of people's face, makes it a little bit more tangible. And then I think to answer your specific question about how do you not get to this place where all of a sudden you're like slowly increasing over time and all of a sudden everything's really expensive and you have to spend this big effort to fix it. It's like breaking that down into smaller pieces. So one thing that I recommended is if there's a way to like cost diff your PRs and figure out like, if we make this change to this model, what's the impact going to be? Trying to make those optimizations more like bite size and a little bit easier to action. And then you don't just have to wait until everything is kind of a mess to be able to fix it.
Is there a particular, like oftentimes, and you had a great slide where you talked about kind of on the left-hand side, or the closer you get to the data source, the more you're paying, like for, on like a usage basis. And then as you move up, get closer to BI and analytics, you're paying more on a per user basis. I'm curious, both for our audience and personally, because I'm in charge of pricing a BI tool, is like, what models do you think are friendliest for teams and when it comes to pricing?
I mean, I think static pricing is definitely going to be the friendliest, because then you know what you're paying. That's the same every month. You're not really surprised by anything. I think the consumption-based ones, I mean, there's arguments for that, right? Because you could be paying for something more than what you need. Like that was kind of the whole idea of moving to the modern data stack in the first place. It's like, don't build this big infrastructure if you're not going to need all of that work, right?
Yeah.
So only pay for what you need. But I do think that a lot of pricing models you'll see, like it's a seat based, but there's like a limitation to it. So I think I showed a slide on like Segment or something. It's like you pay $120 a month on the team plan, but it only gives you a certain number of MTUs. So that's actually seat and consumption based. I think we're starting to see that pricing model come in more. I know DBT changed their pricing model.
Yeah.
It used to be seat based, now it's seat plus successful model builds. So I mean, I think probably the answer is like it kind of depends on what value you're getting out of that tool, and then how much you can optimize usage to make sure that that's aligning to what you're actually paying for it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I know, in BI, like the idea of consumption pricing is still very new, and kind of the question is like, well, consuming what?
Right.
And it's much more common to have just user-based pricing.
Yeah.
But then you run into the situation of like, well, we licensed 1,500 users, but actually only 250 people ever access the system.
Right.
It's just, it's a very challenging thing to figure out. Do you think, do vendors do a good enough job, like helping people understand their spend?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think we're actually, so the office hours, Data Council does office hours after each talk, which is a really interesting way to engage with people after your session. So maybe a half dozen people came to mine, and we were actually talking through this problem, and we were kind of like, someone mentioned, they're like, well, these companies must be able to measure this themselves, so why don't they make this easier for the end user? And it's like, well, if you think about the way their business model works, like they're not going to build a feature that is, like when you think about how your company would prioritize building features and adding things, you're not going to prioritize something that's going to help you reduce revenue. And we kind of got into like a bit of a joke about politics. It's like maybe in the long term that would have a better impact on your business if you were to be able to help people have a better user experience with your pricing model. They're maybe less likely to churn.
Yeah.
They're going to be more trustworthy of you. They're going to have a better relationship with you, and you might retain them for longer. But what do people get incentivized on? They get incentivized on OKRs and like the next year of a plan. And so that person is optimizing for the next 12 months. They may not even be here in a few years. So do they care about long-term customer retention? So I was kind of like making a joke about politics, and like politics, you're only here for a season, and you're not really and you're not really like optimizing for the long term.
Yeah, I once heard, I was listening to a radio show about the subprime mortgage crisis and how everybody in that, they would use this phrase, IBG, YBG, I'll be gone, you'll be gone.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
That's how they
That
all
makes a lot of
rationalize
sense.
it to themselves. It's like, well, none of us are going to be here when this blows up anyway,
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
That's, so what, now, what, like, have you, you're head of data at Howkota. I mean, have you had to put a lot of this stuff into practice over the last year? Like, when it comes to cost containment, I imagine it ultimately falls to you.
Yeah. And so I mean, obviously, because I've been leaning into this topic for conferences, I've definitely been putting more work into building the cost containment stuff, kind of out of curiosity myself, but I also I want to build something. Like, I'm a data team of one. I'm trying to figure out how to bring value to a company that is still relatively early. And I think like where we make decisions, there's still at our stage, a lot of it's going to be, speed and instinct based, but there are going to be some places where you want to lean into data. So I think it's like figuring out like, how do you not put too much investment into something like cost containment at this stage, but also make sure that you're able to deliver value without running up a bill at a company that you're still at an early stage. So I think for me, it's like, I think building it from the ground up is going to be a lot easier. So it's something I've kind of been hacking away and tinkering away. But I can kind of see there's probably some arguments that people are like, oh, I can't believe you would spend that much time on cost containment and not delivering value. So I think there is like a balance there that you want to strike.
Well, and I liked how you basically showed the equation. And I wish I could remember the quote off the top of my head, but you had a great quote about it, related to like how cost is the other side of the value equation, right? And there has been this huge conversation in data the last year and a half about value. But there's another lever you can pull, and that is the cost lever.
Exactly.
And if you don't pull it proactively, someone may pull it for you.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the big thing is like if you don't know what you're spending, someone on your finance team does, and your leadership is probably having that conversation and you're not in that room. So that's probably not a good place to be. Like you don't want them coming to you and being like, hey, you're laid off because you cost us this much money and you can't tell us what value you're driving. Like personally, I would rather know what I'm spending. And I think that also is a good thing to internalize. It's like, okay, if I spend this much money on my data team monthly, are we actually delivering that much value? And that really should put that in your head of like, how do we actually quantify, how do I deliver the same, or like not just the same, but even more value than what we're spending?
Yeah. Now, do you think, I'm curious, do you think kind of the fragmentary nature of the modern data stack, where we're like, I'm going to buy one tool for every point on the journey from source system to end user delivery. Do you think that has exacerbated this problem or just made it harder to control costs?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that goes back to that like interplay of pricing, but it's like you don't just have one bill that you have to think about. Now you've got to think about, okay, if we connect this to Snowflake and we give access like a BI tool or something, we give access to people here. Like now actually other players have control over the cost on your Snowflake warehouse. If you open up Looker or another Good Data or another BI tool to your whole company, that's going to increase consumption. And yes, there's value associated with that, but you kind of have to think about like, that's one pricing model over here, and then also my warehouse, and then all of these other tools that are kind of in the stack. So yeah, I do think like as we start to see more bundling happening over this period where there's more pressure put onto teams, that unfortunately vendors are going to probably leave the market. I think it'll probably end up being a good thing for data teams because you're not going to be like, I think I showed a list of like all the tools that we had in our tech stack. It's like, hopefully that won't be like 10 things long. Maybe it'll be 5, maybe it'll be 3.
Yeah.
And then you're just at the end of the month or the annual cost or whatever, like you're just spending one bill instead of having to figure out everything.
Yeah. So do you think, I have a theory that increasingly the market will value tools that can do more than one thing.
Yes.
Even if any particular feature is not the best in class at that feature, the fact that it can deliver, one tool can do what 5 tools had done. Well, not the best, but will be valuable. Do you see things moving that way?
Yeah, we definitely agree. Especially at Howkota, like we're looking for ways because we are in more of like the data management space. We connect to so many tools in the tech stack. We're actively trying to find those places that we can move into different markets a little bit more or different areas a little bit more. And so one of the features that we recently added is monitoring. So we've added observability. And this was a question that we would often get from customers. It's like, okay, you've got all this information. I can see all my pipelines. I can see my lineage. It would be so cool if we could also see the test results and we could also see observability and we could build monitoring. So we're like, let's bring that in. And so that's something that, I don't want to say it's easy to build, but it's like there's a lot of people out there that are doing just monitoring and observability, and they go very deep on it. But I think what you're saying is great. It's kind of like the Pareto principle of like, if you can get that 80% as good as another vendor, it's going to bring a lot of value to data teams, and it means that they don't have to buy 5 or 6 different tools. They can just buy one, hopefully.
Where should someone start? Let's say they're watching this and they realize they have a problem. What are some practical steps they can take to try to rein this in?
Yeah, I think the steps that I kind of listed out was like, I think the first one for me was like, and this probably sounds really weird to people who've been in their team for a while, but it's like if you are coming in as a new head of data or a new data lead, it's like just figure out all the tools that you have, which probably sounds kind of crazy, but if you don't have a tool like Howkota, you don't have a catalog, something like that, you might not even know all the tools that your team is using. So like in my previous companies, we had Salesforce, but we also had HubSpot. It's like you might have multiple CRMs, you might have multiple tools that all have data, and there's all costs associated with that. So just do like an inventory of all the tools that you have, kind of list those out, and then start to figure out what the pricing models are. So one of the things that I noticed is sometimes the data team isn't the one who's setting the tool up, and so you don't know what the terms were, you don't know what the contract was, and so kind of documenting all of that, and then figuring out where the cost data lives. So if you can get your hands on that cost data, if you can build a DBT package or get it pulled in from a different source, that's super helpful. And then trying to build an asset, so something that's going to help you, a dashboard, something like that. I think that probably sounds like a lot of work for people, so maybe that's not the best place to start, but that would be kind of the path that I would start going down, is like thinking about how you can build something to like help you measure it, essentially.
Well, in a way, right, you're a data team or an analytics team. You need some data and analytics for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? I'm always shocked over the course of my career, the data teams I've been on where we have no
Yeah.
like insight into
Yeah.
our own performance, or like the
sure.
consultancies I've worked at where we run our business on spreadsheets. But
Yeah.
what we do is we help you
Exactly.
to not run your business on
Yeah.
spreadsheets.
In a previous version of the presentation, I had like a guy looking in a mirror, and I was like, data teams are pretty good at measuring everybody else, but we don't really do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for cost and everything else we do.
Let me shift gears a little bit, just the conference as a whole.
Yeah.
This is my first time here. I think it's your first
Yeah.
time too. So what's your overall take on Data Council?
Yeah, I've had an awesome time so far. I really think that the office hours is like a really cool way of being able to engage with the people that really the talk resonated with them. So I think that's a really interesting format. And I think overall, like the kind of theme that I know, like the AI is, it's like AI meets its maker, I think is like the theme of the conference.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting because I do think like for a long time, like data was the shiny, sexy toy that everybody cared about. And now it's like AI is kind of taking that spotlight from us.
Yes.
But we all know that like the AI is not going to, the models are only so good. It's like they're going to get better over time, but really the data that's fed into them is what is so important. So it's kind of been a common theme in a lot of the talks. So yeah.
Yeah, that's been what I've observed too. Do you what is like Howkota? Are you guys diving into the AI thing? Are you trying to integrate it into your? The answer is probably yes. Everybody is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But we are too. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, like your take on it. How are you implementing AI in
Yeah.
the platform?
Well, it's funny because I know you and I were at the speaker dinner last night and we were talking on, it's kind of like table stakes now. I think having some sort of a built-in AI functionality is kind of like expected, I think, in every single
It
tool.
happens so fast.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. And so, yeah, Howkota's already built a tool like that. And now what we're looking to do is find a way to really advance it and make that like a differentiator. By having access to the data layer and all of the semantic information in your company, it does kind of give it a leg up on something
Yeah.
than just like a common chat GPT. But I think ultimately, tools like Howkota are going to hopefully be part of the AI stack in more of a way that's just like generative AI. And this is, probably further down the road, but I think it's really moving away from this like conversational AI that we're seeing and actually to something that like potentially could be a little more autonomous. So it's like maybe it can read all the metadata in your tool and actually start to fill in missing information or
Yeah.
give you insights into areas that you might be able to fix things and make it a little bit better. So that's what I'm pretty excited about is I think it's actually going to be more like this feedback loop. So I think once it starts to become a little bit more actionable, I think that's where we'll really start to see the rubber hit the road.
Yeah, I think that's where it's headed too. Like the chat interface, it's very much like, well, you just have to have one. You
Yeah,
just
exactly.
have to have a
Yeah.
chat interface,
Yeah.
and whatever your tool does, you have to also be able to do it through the chat
Yeah.
interface.
And you need to have good prompt engineering on top
Yep.
of that. It's like if your prompt engineering isn't really great, then like it's not going to be a great solution in your tool. So that's very important as well. But yeah.
Yeah, but I think Howkota and Good Data both, because we have a semantic driven BI tool
Yeah.
like that has
Yeah.
been so enormously helpful for
sure.
us
Yeah.
to differentiate with AI in the BI space, because many other tools are kind of built on this workbook paradigm where there's no expectation that you're going to spend any more time modeling the data or putting in business terminology.
Right.
You only do what is necessary for a single dashboard.
Yes. Yeah. It's very
um,
one-to-one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this kind of, one-to-many approach
Yeah.
that we've taken has helped a lot when it comes to developing AI.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. So I think that just about covers it. It was a great presentation. It was
you.
packed, by the way, like standing room only for Lindsay's, like people lining the walls. I don't know if did you notice that, or were you just like in presenter mode?
Yeah, I definitely went definitely blackout, and
Yep.
there speaker notes. There were no speaker notes that came up, so I was like, well, we're just doing it live. We're going from memory, which was
Oh.
fine. It was okay.
Oh, you
but-
did great.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's totally packed. So congratulations on
Thank you.
the awesome
Thanks.
presentation. And any final words of advice here before we wrap up?
No, I think, if you're a data team and you don't really know what you're spending on your tech stack, I think you probably want to look into that and start thinking about it a little bit more closely. So that would maybe be my parting advice.
Awesome. That is wise advice. Okay, where can people catch up with you?
I'm usually mostly on LinkedIn. I'm also in some Slack communities. DBT is the one that I kind of poke around in the most. And we actually I'll give a plug to MDS Fest. So we have MDS Fest coming up in a couple weeks. That is, you can find it on mdsfest.com. I don't know when this is going live, so maybe I should check that first. April.
It'll be live before MDS
Okay.
Fest,
So
yeah.
it should be April 8th to 11th, I think. Everything's free, totally virtual, so you can sign up, and you'll get talks that were kind of like at Data Council. So yeah.
Awesome. Oh, and your show. Plug the show.
Yes, and Women Lead Data. Yes,
Yeah.
every Wednesday, new episodes highlighting wonderful women working in the data industry.
Cool. Awesome. Well, check out
you.
Lindsay, folks. Are they recording? Did they record these? Are these going to be
They did.
publicly available?
Yeah,
Okay.
they should all be on YouTube.
So when it goes live, be sure to check out her data. Hey, folks.
Hey.
There's something not quite right about the way StreamYard is displaying these videos. Like this cuts off the last 10 seconds anyway.
Yeah.
So catch Lindsay on LinkedIn. And apologies to Lindsay. I said this video would go live before MDS Fest, and then it didn't. So there's that. But yeah, so there you have it. Big thank you again to Lindsay for sitting for that interview. She is awesome. Connect with her on LinkedIn. Follow her there. Her show is every Wednesday, Women Lead Data. It's a very good show, and I highly recommend it. One interesting thing about this that Lindsay pointed out that I think is really important for everyone to realize, who, especially in the kind of the modern data stack world, if you're using any of these cloud vendors that came out in the last 5 or 6 years, is that up until recently, they didn't actually have to make any money. And now they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Now their investors are expecting them to show positive cash flow and ROI, whereas in the low interest rate environment, it was all about just chasing. It was all about chasing customers, right? Yeah. Thanks, Jerome Powell. And so, so you may find yourself, I will predict, as your contracts are coming up for renewal, that there are going to be exciting new licensing models being proposed to you that will inevitably result in you having to pay a lot more money for these cloud solutions, because these venture-backed companies are now expected to make money, and they weren't for their entire lives. They weren't expected to make money. They were just expected to show the most insane growth trajectory possible.
And they were like the Uber method, right?
Right. And they were allowed to incinerate money to do it. Yeah.
Just huge pools of money. Just, hey, burn this cash, try to get market advantage, and then start squeezing them.
Right. So, and now we've reached the squeezing part of this.
Yeah, we've reached the squeeze.
So now, the other interesting thing about this is I'm curious, because our audience is like half startup people who kind of work in the modern data stack space and in tech companies and tech adjacent companies, and it's half people who work at like megacorps.
Because it's funny, that's the composition of the people running the show as well, in a way. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Someone working for a startup and someone working for 100-year-old institution.
Yeah, and it's reflected in our audience, which is nice, right? There's synergy. But the people who work at like the startup half of our audience, this is a huge concern. And I'm curious, Eric, you work at a big company, an old company.
Yep.
And unless I'm mistaken, all of your costs are kind of like fixed long-term capital expenses.
Yes. There are very few services that are like pay by use or anything like that. Or if we do have a cloud contract, most of the time it's for capacity, right? So like because we're recently switching over from on-prem data warehouse to Oracle's data warehouse, right?
In the cloud.
Oracle in the cloud, right?
Yep.
Yeah, in Exadata. We've been on Oracle the whole time. We're not going from something else to Oracle right now. We've been like most big organizations, we're stuck on Oracle. And yeah, that's not a pay per use. Most things aren't pay per use. Individual departments may have like small contracts for stuff. So maybe some individual departments that are paying for their own subscription software will start feeling the squeeze. But generally, no, we're not. There's basically, it takes 6 months to sign a contract, and those contracts last years, right? With any vendor, right? Just because that's how things go when you're big enough, right? And where universities are also somewhat involved with the government. So like it takes even
Yeah.
longer because of that. Because like, yeah, you got to make sure things are totally up and up. Unlike private business where you can kind of fudge stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and you have really strict requirements, like when it comes to federal grants and that sort of thing.
Yes.
Really strict
Oh yeah.
requirements about what the money can go towards and how auditable it is and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I know you dealt with a lot of that during COVID, right? When it came to the COVID reporting, I would assume, right? Because
Yeah.
was that like the federal government paid you guys to do that, didn't they?
Yeah. I think. I don't know. I just wrote the reports. You know, we're
Right.
used to dealing with HIPAA and FERPA stuff because we're university. So
Right.
that
And
wasn't a
I
huge
guess that's
concern,
kind of the
but
point is like you had it. So you obviously COVID was a huge unanticipated use case
yes.
that you had to address. And because you're operating a fixed cost on-prem infrastructure,
Yeah.
there was no impact to your technology spend.
No, not really. We were considering because there were third-party vendors that were for like vaccination tracking and contact tracing that were popping up. None of them were in any way mature, so we ended up just rolling our own. And yeah, using resources we already had basically, so it didn't really cost. It costs a lot of effort, but it didn't cost a lot of money.
Right. And that's the difference between kind of the world, Lindsay's operating in at Howkota and
Mhm.
Lindsay's customers are operating in versus at Michigan State. You guys are making I mean, like you said, you're just now migrating from on-prem Oracle Exadata to Oracle's
Yeah,
cloud warehouse.
yeah. So Ryan, so you're a startup. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming all of your stuff is in the cloud, developed in the
100%.
cloud.
Yeah, we have
So
nothing.
are you guys starting to like, because we're talking about the squeezes coming? Are you guys starting from other vendors you're working with, like starting to put the squeeze on you?
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we see that, right? Like, so when renewal time comes around, we have had vendors that are coming to us with 30%, 40%, 50% uplifts on the licensing. For like kind of year by year contracts, even, right? We want you to
Mhm.
sign a 1-year contract, and we want you to pay 50% more than you paid last year. Yeah, we're absolutely seeing that, and that's for both like services we use, and like pieces of technology that we buy from kind of these vendors, and it's caused us to say, okay, do we really want to use vendor X
Yeah.
because vendor Y, may be happy to have us for the same amount of money we've been
That you've
paying
already
for
been
that.
spending.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. But that's also why the vendors try to lock you into their proprietary stuff. So
Sure, of
it's
course.
not so
Well,
easy to leave AWS when your entire deployment pipeline is in their custom stuff.
it's very hard to leave AWS.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I know some people have done it, like famously, who is it? Boot Camp? I think it was.
boot. Yeah, I think it was boot camp. Yeah, it was boot
Yeah,
camp.
right. And claimed multi-million-dollar savings
Savings.
by leaving the cloud and going back to on-prem.
Mhm.
The thing about the on-prem days is like the costs were fixed and
Yeah.
capitalizable, right? It was
Yeah.
a capex cost, which was especially where I was working at the time in the utility industry. Like utilities want to drive everything through capex instead of opex,
Mhm.
and so that was another bonus. Like they loved capital expenditures in
Yeah.
utilities because that feeds into their business. The kind of
Yeah, and that's capital expenditures versus OpEx, operational expenditures.
correct. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, yeah, and so it's just very interesting to see now when you are making the shift to Oracle's cloud. Are
Mhm.
you then moving to a consumption or compute based model, or are you buying fixed capacity?
I think we're doing fixed capacity.
Yeah.
We're doing fixed capacity. I think with Azure, we don't use Azure very much at all. We use it for like one uh was it SSAS cube or
You have a single cube?
SASS. Yeah, we have a single cube, right? We have a single cube, so we're doing paper capacity for that cube, right? And that's it. Right.
Yeah.
And then everything else, because like our Power BI, that's the cube's using like pay per use, and then anything else like our Power BI instances and stuff, their capacity right? Not license, not like overall license based on like that peer capacity.
Okay.
So that's how we're doing that. So like, yeah, not many operation like fluctuating operational costs, right?
Yep. And
You
your
know, just
Cognos is on-prem, right?
yeah, on-prem.
And then Tableau, do you have Tableau Enterprise Server?
Yeah, it's on-prem.
It's on-prem. Yeah.
Everything's on-prem. Like
Everything.
every BI tool is on-prem, right? So there's no, we pay for the licensing and we have resources and that's it, right? Which is turning out to be a good way to do it because the squeeze is starting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, startups, like we said, they are under pressure to actually make money because money's not free. You can't go and get near zero interest rate capital anymore. So Carl, a couple comments from Carl. Carl says, interesting discussion. I've led analytics, but sat in a commercial function and watched the behavior of IT groups. Some thoughts. Vendor and customer incentives are unaligned. Customers can't expect any supplier to not seek to maximize economics for itself. 100%, right? The suppliers are in the business of making money. Everybody is in the business of making money.
It's true.
And really, the incentives are not aligned. I think, and this is one interesting thing. So I did a poll asking kind of this question, Carl, on LinkedIn to people: how do you prefer to pay? And it was specifically, I can't remember if I tailored it specifically to the BI analytics market or it was just data tech in general. Do you want to pay for capacity reservations? Do you want to pay as you go for usage, or do you want to pay per user? And people chose pay as you go per usage. I think because they felt it had the tightest value alignment. Like, well, I'm only paying for for what I'm using. But I can tell you, as someone who works at a vendor, that you'll get a much better deal if you are reserving a fixed amount of capacity.
Yeah.
Versus pay as you go for the same amount of compute and storage. You'll get a better price if you're reserving it versus paying as you go.
Yeah, but I've seen
that requires that you're able to accurately project how much you need.
Yeah, that's like I've seen like Amazon's QuickSight, their BI tool. Their pricing is like pay for base capacity, and then beyond that you pay per use, right? Which is a smart way to do it. But I've talked with someone who like their company was like, I don't know what part of it they were scared off by, but some part of that scared them off, right? Like just like I think maybe they just wanted pay per use, or maybe they just wanted base capacity. I didn't get in that detail, but like QuickSight is doing both, and it'll scare both people off doing it that way. I think so. I think
maybe it made it seem too complicated.
Yeah, it's like, oh, so I'm paying, even if I don't use it, I'm paying $500 a month just to turn this on, and I have to pay to use it. Like maybe that was not useful for them.
Yeah, Carl continued on. Bankers can operate like they have a free call option on the bank, so their incentives are to take risks because they don't incur the cost and get rewards if the bet works. That's absolutely true. Carl, the IT group he was working with seemed more interested in learning new tools and technologies and less focused on cost or good enough solutions. I'm curious what industry this was in, Carl.
With the rule of cool wins. I guess it depends. There's probably startups do that more. Large organizations have people who've been there for 20 years and they just want to, it's good enough. I don't need to do any more work.
It really, I mean, there's a lot of culture baked into which side of that coin you fall on. Giving business data users transparency on costs is critical. Often the value accrues to the business, but the IT owns the budget. So have the group where the value accrues see the cost. Yeah, this is something interesting I've seen companies try to do as well. Both for the software spend, and then also I've seen IT organizations that actually do intercompany billing. So it's almost like the IT department sends the marketing department a bill. And says, hey, that work we did for you, this is how much it costs. And that's one of those things. The particular company I was at the time, they had introduced, and then they took away, and then they brought back, and then they took away. And I think what they struggled with was just the added complexity of kind of intercompany accounting and asking departments to do that for themselves, as opposed to having just the accounting department worry about the company's holistic accounting. And then Is this the same? Oh, this is the same comment. Yep. Yeah. So I'm curious, Carl, like where, if you can share what company you were at, where you had this experience, or at least what industry that
Yeah.
might be interesting.
Yeah. So, Ryan, we've been talking about like the squeezes coming. And Lindsay let's talk a little bit more about what Lindsay was talking about. So like, what are the ways to actually save money? Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of companies and teams that I've worked with have no idea what is driving their spend. First of all, like she gave the example of, someone came up to her at the conference and said, "Hey, we realized that someone was running a single query that was going to cost us $30,000 per year." Right. And a lot of companies have no visibility into that. And so I think, it's something we've said on this show forever. Analytics teams have no analytics on their analytics.
Yeah.
And knowing who is using it and what for and how much do those things cost.
Oh yeah.
It's like G.I. Joe knowing is half the battle for those of us who grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
I think that's the first step you need to take. You need to ask yourself, am I even able to answer these questions?
Well, it's funny. Like the vendors don't build that in because like they want you to spend more. It's just like IBM with licensing. It's like you don't know you were using an extra 1,000 licenses because you had something misconfigured until IBM spends 3 months auditing you, and then you owe them $100,000 or whatever it is.
I've sat in those conversations after an IBM audit, and it's not pretty because vendors often don't make it easy for you to tell how much you're spending. Even in these pay-as-you-go models, there's often a lag between their reporting and what you're able to see. So, maybe a couple days, you can only see a couple days in the past. You can almost never see in real time what's being spent, and your ability to project is obviously it's very hard to project what it's going to cost. And we've seen that even at Good Data in our customer base, right? We have customers who are rolling out projects, and they roll out a project, and it turns out that the project is going to cost 4x Databricks what they anticipated. And they didn't know that, and they didn't model it. Would they have been able to model it? I would argue probably it would have been possible to, but they either didn't do it or they failed to do it appropriately. And now, they're in a situation where the underlying data architecture costs have nothing to do with us and Good Data. It has to do with what they're spending in the pay-as-you-go model on Databricks. And the as-you-go piece wound up being way more than they expected. Of course, Andy says the best way to save money is to lay off the data team, and that has been an unfortunate reality the last year and a half that we've seen kind of rolling across the industry. But again, my question is this also true? We talk all the time here on the Super Data Brothers show. We live in the Detroit area, and our big companies are not tech firms.
No.
Right? They build stuff. We've got obviously the auto companies. We've got a major appliance manufacturer in the area. We've got a huge company that manufactures and purifies silicon for the creation of computer chips and solar panels. Right? Like that's a huge business around here. Are they laying off their data teams? Is GM laying off its data team? Is Ford saying, we blew all this money on this data team, it's time to get rid of it?
Probably not.
I don't know that they are. Right? I think
because when tech companies, they don't actually do things, right?
Right.
They don't actually do stuff. Like most of the time, what they do is get you addicted to your phone. Most tech companies, right? So like it's like when you have an actual product to make, the data around that product is very important because like you're working with physical space, which precludes any bullshit, right? It excludes any bullshit because like you can bullshit so much until the brake pads don't work, right? So like you do need data to like real companies need real data and real people to work with that data.
Did you see, by the way, I just saw this article on the Cybertruck. When you close the frunk, Okay. They're supposed to have detection. Like it's supposed to like stop auto closing if it detects that there's something in the way, so that it doesn't accidentally like pinch your finger off. And it only has detectors on the front and not on the side.
So
So
you
if
can
your hand is like, and if the frunk's coming down, and your hand is in the way, and it's the side of the frunk, it will just pinch your.
Oh yeah,
hand.
I saw that. Like I think it was chopping up cucumbers and stuff. Like just
People are chopping fruits using their
It's
their
a feature.
Yeah, it is a feature. Thanks, Elon. But that to your point, right? That's the risks you run. Those are the risks you run when you have a real world company, right? Is you might chop off someone's hand.
Yeah.
Whereas the risks you run if you're just trying to get people to engage with their phone is like long-term psychological damage to an entire generation.
Yeah, but that's a side effect. That's an externalized cost.
Andy says F1 team was using Excel to manage 20,000 parts. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's it's often, that's the flip side of the coin. But it can be done. And like lots of companies have made lots of money doing that. I will tell you, I had the opportunity one time to pitch Berkshire Hathaway a BI project. And when we got on the phone with them, they were basically like, yeah, we run the whole company with Excel, and our philosophy is the company has to be simple enough to run with Excel, or else we're doing it wrong. So we really don't need any of this. And that's Warren Buffett.
That's nice. Anyway.
Yep.
Thanks for the call.
And he told us that up front. He's like, I'll listen to your pitch, but I'm just going to tell you, like, our whole philosophy is if we can't run Berkshire Hathaway in Excel spreadsheets, we're doing something wrong.
Yeah. They say that, but I bet there's some wacky.
Well, I think part of what they do is like, because they like they're a company that owns companies. So the companies they own might have BI.
Have be doing. Yeah, I guess they're pushing that downstream. So
they are.
I guess if their goal is like at the very top, things are simple enough for them.
Yes,
that they can run
he told us that's exactly what they do. Like each of their companies gives them like a standard, like the reporting that takes place between See's Candy and Berkshire is that See's Candy sends Berkshire an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah,
and that's what they want.
Yeah, hey, just give us whatever the company that's Berkshire Hathaway owns everything, right?
Progressive, right? Or is it Geico? I can't remember.
I don't know. Just sends them here's the spreadsheet in the format you want, but beneath that spreadsheet in Geico is just an insane stack of.
Geico itself probably has a huge BI stack and data warehouses and all that sort of stuff. But when it gets to the man at the top, he just wants a spreadsheet. Which I think is true of a lot of the people at the top.
That's true universally.
I know.
Right?
I know.
How many times have we've said this before? We'll say it again that the endpoint of any BI tool is Excel.
Yeah.
Right.
BI
is ETL. BI is ETL for Excel. Yeah.
It's true.
Put that in a shirt. BI is ETL for Excel. Put that in a shirt and wear it at a conference.
Yeah. Well, BI people don't want to. They don't want it to be true. I didn't want it to be true. I can remember lots of time I spent in my career, early on especially, going to business people and saying, well, what are you doing in Excel? Show me what you're doing in Excel. I can reproduce it in BI. Sometimes they were interested in that. When they became interested in it is when an individual built an Excel spreadsheet that like became way too useful. And suddenly everyone was depending on this Excel spreadsheet. Then they were like, we have to get this into BI.
We have to do something, or they were depending on it, and then the problems of that arise.
Right.
Of just sharing Excel sheets.
Yeah. But like for the most part, that's what people actually wanted in my experience with Excel. And maybe it's changed a little over the last decade and people have gotten a little more interested in interacting with the UI, but not a lot.
No, they haven't. They really haven't. Like maybe a little bit, but like every BI report needs an Excel option, right?
Yeah.
Every Power BI report I've ever made has a few slicers. What they slicers has filters, different terminology, different tools. A few slicers up top, maybe like one total count or like one very basic visualization, and then just a table at the bottom.
Yeah.
Some conditional highlighting.
Yeah.
Right. That
with
has
an export button.
with an export button. Oh, let's slice this. Oh yeah, okay, 300 total, 200 in this department. That seems about right. Let's get this data.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most useful, like basically the most useful front end user report you can create.
Yeah.
Simplify, make an easier Excel sheet.
Well, there's even, I mean,
button.
like if you look at in the BI space, like you look at Sigma, for example, Sigma's whole approach is our UI is as Excel-like as possible.
Yeah. I mean,
and
that's
Omni does a similar thing. Omni's more Looker-like in terms of the UI and the overall platform, but Omni's calculation engine is based on Excel functions and Excel formulas, not on SQL.
Yeah. How many times have
they allow
how
you
many
to
times?
use
Yeah, like I've never used those tools, but I imagine it must be some ways must be nice, because how many times have you like had a report for someone? It's just like a table with like a bunch of like sub calculations. They're like, oh, can we just add like this calculation to just be adding this? It'd be adding this column in this row and this column in this row.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, actually, that'd be incredibly difficult because of the way the SQL is and the calculations are. But it's like, it's just adding these two numbers. It's like that's not how like a data.
It's different. SQL
is not how data
Excel
works.
Yeah.
Outside of Excel, yeah, it's not just individual calculations. So you have to keep the entire like, okay, what does adding this do to the SQL statement that's created and all that other stuff.
And I understand the appeal of that feature. I mean, like intuitively, I am the data person. So many data people I talked to took this path where they became data people through some other part of the business because they were the Excel guru.
Yeah, the Excel guru was like, oh, then they also learned Tableau, right?
Exactly, and then they, now they're even ahead of data, or a CDO who started as the Excel guru 15 years ago,
and so they don't understand data warehousing and like, yeah.
But I didn't take that road. So when people are like, oh, I love, like it's so easy. Like I guess my point is, many times over my career, people have been stunned that I suck at Excel. and it's because they took the Excel pathway into data, and I didn't. I went straight to my very first job in data. I was a Cognos developer. We got from Excel to BI. Yeah, this is
that's Lynn.
This is friend of the show, Lynn Bender, the organizer of our favorite data conference, Data Day Texas. Lynn, good to have you here. I am looking forward to Data Day Texas 25. So let us know when you want us to start promoting it, because we will.
Yeah, we will. We always promote it because it's a great. Yeah. It's where we started. It really is. It's a conference we printed with, like, our first thing we did as the Super Data Brothers for like this show was print T-shirts and go to Data Day Texas.
Yeah. It's an awesome conference. I highly recommend everybody who can attend should attend. It's really fun. So the Excel to BI pathway, it's like the skills take you from Excel into BI. And then once you get there, all anybody will want you to do is take the data from BI and put it into Excel.
like landing where you started.
Yeah, it is. It's full circle, right? It's the circle of life.
It's a circle of data.
Yeah, but I mean, so kind of taking it back to today's topic, that I think that we're seeing a lot of that, like the costs of these pay-as-you-go platforms is really going up. One of the things that we do at Good Data actually is we have licensing models that we try to align more with. Like, a lot of our customers are doing highly multi-tenant data product deployments.
Yeah.
And so what we do then is we actually do like a platform fee and then a charge per tenant. So it's like, so it's like if you are giving analytics to 1,000 customers, the metric we're measuring is how many customers do you have? And that kind of ties us pretty nicely in those circumstances when that's the use case, pretty nicely with the value, where it's like, hey, they're paying me more money because they're offering analytics to more of their customers. But we're not, when I say customers, I mean like, you can think of it as like a tenant, right? Because we have like a super multi-tenant BI platform. So what we end up doing is you can programmatically create, you have 1,000 customers, you can programmatically create and maintain 1,000 BI environments very easily that inherit objects and data models from like a parent environment. That ends up being the value. And then what happens from a licensing perspective is if you offer analytics to 1,000 customers, I charge you based on that number, and as that number goes up, the amount the amount you pay to Good Data goes up. But we're not keeping track of how many users are accessing your portals, or how many queries are you running, or anything like that. Right?
Yes, it's per user licensing.
It's like a per tenant. Now we do have we have lots of different models. We have a per user model if we're doing internal analytics.
Because if some company says, "Oh, we only do this model," you're not going to say, "I don't want your money."
No. We're not in that position either. Like Amazon might say, "Look, this is the model. Take it or leave it."
Yeah.
But we're not Amazon. One of the reasons you choose to work with us is because we're not Amazon. Because you can come to us and say, I have these particular licensing needs. Do you guys think you can accommodate it? And the answer with us is oftentimes yes. Whereas when you're dealing with an Amazon or a Snowflake, it's kind of like, no, here are the models. We got another comment from Andy. Lots of newly minted data scientists that skipped Excel and went straight into pandas and SQL. That's absolutely true, Andy.
Yep.
So the data science pathway, we're more talking about the data analyst BI pathway.
Yeah.
Data science pathway, oftentimes they don't do Excel at all. And you can tell, I think, in that they don't have the skills, but also they, they
don't
have
understand
lots of skills.
They don't understand that that's the end point.
Part of it. Yes, and they're not designing for the inevitable dump to Excel. In my experience,
it's funny. Like a lot of them skipped Excel and straight to pandas and SQL. It's like that's true. That's why a year ago, 2-ish years ago, all of a sudden you're hearing like people like dimension. Have you heard of dimensional models, facts and dimensions, OLAP? Yeah. Like it was like this was like a crazy new concept, right? Because that's the path they went through. They went straight to like data science, and that's why it used to be called. They used to be called data models, but now data model means like, oh, here's this thing that does AI stuff. So now it's called semantic layer. Now your modeling of joins together is called the semantic layer instead of a data model, right? It used to be called a data model, but now data model means, hey, this predicts when energy is going to go out in Wisconsin. That's the data model.
Yeah, I mean, it really has been an interesting. There's just the wave of data science, and now I hear like data scientists are really struggling to find jobs, especially entry level. Like there's an oversupply of people who have that aspiring data scientists who know a little Python, a little Pandas, a little SQL, maybe some Spark, and like that skill set. If you're at the entry level, is now so easy to find. That these
because everyone's getting jobs. Google modern data stack, it says learn these things.
Sure, right, and
it's true.
Programs and boot camps and universities are teaching it, and that sort of thing. Dimensional modeling, however, is still something you mostly got to learn on your own.
Yep,
it will be interesting, and this will be the we're at the top of the hour here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to wrap the show up. One interesting thing I'm curious about is if you follow friend of the show, Joe Reese. Joe is really going hard on the return of data modeling and understanding the different types of data models and why you would want to physically or logically or both structure the data in certain ways for certain outcomes as like a lost art. And so maybe I'll reach out to Joe and see if we can do just like a data modeling for dummies episode. That just goes like, where did this come from? What is it? Why did we do it? Why did we stop? What are the common forms of data models? Just kind of like as an education power hour for people who have come up in this modern data stack world where you're not really modeling data, where your data warehouse is 1,000 totally disconnected tables that are feeding 1,000 totally disconnected dashboards, which is often what we see nowadays, as opposed to, spending a year developing a star schema, which is,
I mean, sometimes it's like, hey, there are three tables in the warehouse, and I don't have time to make a model, and I'm just going to make this report. I've done it.
Both approaches are valid. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, in that Rush song, like if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice.
Still have made a choice. Yeah.
If you choose not to model data, you still have modeled data.
Yeah.
No model is a model.
It's just a spaghetti model.
Right. All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us here. As always, we are the Super Data Brothers. Believe it or not, we have a YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, you can always catch us live on LinkedIn or YouTube. But the back catalog of shows, we're up 50 plus shows now. YouTube.com/C/Super Data Brothers will take you to the channel. You can see everything we've done there. We are here almost every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern time to discuss topics like how to save money on your data stack. And so, and then the final thing, of course, right, the influencer thing, like this video, comment on this video, share it with your friends, smash the like button, go to YouTube, subscribe, hit the like button there, ring the bell.
Connect with us on LinkedIn. All that crap. Also, meet us in person. Boom. Gartner Data and Analytics Summit. Not next week, but the week after. I will be there in London. If you are going to Gartner, or your friends are going to Gartner, or your loved ones or your pets, tell them to swing by and say hi. I, of course, work for Good Data. I'm the VP of Product Strategy. We are a Gartner Magic Quadrant vendor in BI. We will be sponsoring the conference, so we'll have a booth. You can catch me at the booth. I will be giving a presentation on Tuesday of that week. That would be the 14th. So swing by the presentation. It is about monetizing data products and how to do it. We did a really cool data product monetization project with our partner Muse, which is a hospitality unicorn. And so maybe that could be a topic on this show.
Yeah. I actually was looking to get a guest here to talk about monetizing data products. Actually, I'm seeing if I can line that up.
Awesome.
So say hi to me at the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit, May 13th through 15th in London. All right. Any last words for the people, Eric?
No, I think that's about it. We're going to sign off here, but if you missed the special clip from the beginning of the show because you tuned in late,
meme of the week,
the meme video of the week that we created, the topical meme video of the week about data teams wasting money, then stick around after we do the outro goodbye.
All right. Yeah. So that's it. We will catch you here next week, folks. Until then, I am Ryan.
I am Eric.
And we are the Super Data Brothers. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
There's nothing better than a cigarette. Unless it's a cigarette lit with a $100 bill. Put 5,000 bucks on the Lakers. Hire Kenny G to play for me in the elevator. My house is dirty. Buy me a clean one.
Krusty, as your accountant, I must warn you.
Did you send those 1,000 roses to B. Arthur's grave?
Yes, but she's still...
I don't want to hear the end of any sentences.
George Carlin on 3.
Yeah? Lawsuit? Oh, come on. Well, excuse me. Give him 10 grand.
Steve Martin on 4.
10 grand.
You've got to stop blowing your money like this, Krusty.
No can do.